I'm a game developer making a board game party game, and in this video I'm adding a bunch of items you can use to attack other players on the board, disrupt their dice roll, and humiliate your friends so badly they'll never want to play with you again, as well as cards you collect that upgrade your abilities and even change how you interact with the board. All this revolving around the player's dice throw mechanic, starting off with some new throwable items. I got to work making the 3D model for the tomato in Blender, doing the texturing next, and then adding it to the game in Unity. I started with a modified version of the cherry bomb pie without the explosion, making some particle effects for when it hits something, and programming how much damage it deals. It's a basic throwable item that deals minor damage to other players, but it can be used before rolling your die, to activate targets on the board, or destroy hazards and tiles near you. Next item I wanted to make needed to apply some kind of debuff to the player hit by it. An idea I had, and a lot of other people in the comments of the last video, was to have an item that halves a player's next dice roll. Instantly thought of Nickelodeon slime and how awful it would be to move after that experience. The initial idea for this was to have a giant slime ball you throw at other players. I made this 3D model for it, and after putting it in Unity, it felt a bit too simple for the board, and it needed a bit more personality. So I settled on a slime jar, first making the transparent container to hold the slime, and then adding a glob inside to be textured later. I made this wobbly globly shader for it, which I can use later for the player's slimed effect. Modifying the code for the other throwable items, and you can now slime other players. The jar breaks when it hits something, sliming all players in its area of effect, and getting a direct hit on a player also deals minor damage. The slimed effect halves their next dice roll, lasting only one turn. Just like other throwable items, you can activate board targets for bonuses. Except dice number bonuses, they only affect dice that hit them, but you can still activate them if you don't want other players to use them on that round. Both new items pair great with the new long throw card. While holding this card, players can throw their dice and items farther on the board. Cards act more like passive items in a roguelike. You collect them from landing on card tiles on the board, and you can hold up to 3 cards at a time. Previously, my idea for this system was to base them off playing cards, and have higher value cards have better effects. But seeing the game's art style and overall vibe evolve over the past year, I decided to instead have them based off trading cards. I had a lot of fun making the art for these, as well as coming up with the effects and the overall system. My favorite art is probably the Potent Heals card, which makes healing from any items or tiles restore all of your health rather than a fraction of it. Which leads nicely into the next new item we need, something to heal the player. We need a basic healing item that restores 50 health points. I made a syringe for the player to hold, and working off the bubble juice application code, it wasn't too difficult to implement. The part that took the longest was making the animation, which I don't consider myself a particularly good animator, and I rely heavily on sites like Mixamo for the most part, but custom animations definitely end up having more personality to them, and if I had more time, I'd love to do more. I have my own system I made to change parts of the player outfit for things like items and status effects, so when a player slips on a banana peel and they get the bozo cap, it temporarily changes the player's hat equipped, and then reverts that change after the bozo cap is removed. This also gets used when the player holds out an item in their hand. What I'm actually doing is changing the player's hand outfit slot mesh and material. This is pretty convenient, but it means there's some hard restraints equipping anything to the player's outfit, such as each slot is limited to 1 mesh material, and I can't really have any moving parts. But I wanted to have the syringe liquid animate, so I got around this by making 3 different models with varying amounts of liquid in the syringe, and I have timing set to cycle through each model quickly during the injection animation. I do a similar process with the bubble juice animation, where I switch from a closed bottle to an open bottle and then to a messy bottle at the end. Setting the timings for these animations does take a while, so it's nice to have more simple application animations like the banana peel, where you just place it instantly on the tile. Speaking of which, we need a new damage dealing item that you place down on a tile that activates when a player runs over it. A comment I saw in the last video was for a mouse trap, which I thought perfectly suited the style of the game. I got to work making the model for this, separating out each part to be animated later, as well as a variant for the player to hold when you inspect the item before using it. I made it so when the trap spawns on a tile, it has a setting animation which rotates the parts into place. Next came the activating animation, which has the trap swing closed and some particle and text effects. The next player that runs over the tile or lands on it activates the trap, receiving 25 damage. I made it so for a short period after, the player gets a mousetrap visual effect, which really ties the whole thing together. You can of course set the trap off with throwable items or with your dice throw, which gets a whole lot easier when you have the mega dice card. This card increases the size of your dice, and yes, along with most other cards, it's stackable. This is another one of the 12 cards that will be in the demo.
More coming to the full game.
Along with any other card, you can disable it in the game rules before the match starts. Hell, you can disable the whole card system if you're looking for a more vanilla board game experience. Vitality cards affect your health, wealth cards affect your coins and diamonds, dice cards affect your dice and other throwing abilities, and shadow cards are only revealed to the player that gets them, then revealed to all other players when they're used, unless the card specifies otherwise. My favorite out of these has got to be the hidden gem card, which grants the player a secret bonus diamond diamond at the end of the game, or the weapon of choice card that lets you steal an item of your choosing from the next player you hit with your dice. The next type of item I want to implement is a dice modifier. This type of item changes your dice for one turn. The first one I want to make is a heavy or metal die. I started off with the idea for just a metal cube, like a clean cut block of tungsten, but it really wasn't doing it for me, so I redesigned it and went for more of a weapon forged look, complete with scorch marks. The iron dice. It deals 30 damage to players it hits, which is 20 more than the default dice, and it's also slightly bigger. I played around with extra gravity, which some people suggested as a dice modifier, but it just didn't feel right. One of the benefits of using the iron dice is that it's unaffected by the bubble shield. So when using the default dice in a bubble, it nerfs your throwing range. This is a trade-off as the bubble protects the player from the next instance of damage received, and it's pretty overpowered. The iron dice lets you throw through the bubble without the range nerf, giving it more utility and just giving you more of a reason to use it. The next dice item I want to implement is a Dungeons & Dragons inspired D20, a 20-sided die. This presents a whole load of new challenges for implementation. With the iron dice, for the most part, it was as easy as switching out a few models and changing a few stats, but the D20 needs an entirely new system because of its 20 sides. Making the 3D model for it was pretty straightforward and was basically a few clicks in Blender. Next, making the texture and then finishing the material shader in Unity. Then came a full hour of manually placing the face numbers in the center of each face on the die. Yes, a full hour. Next, I had to do something about the collision shape because last I checked, a cube does not have 20 sides. Because of the way the physics of the game is handled for online networking, custom collision shapes just weren't reliable and either jumped around or fell through the floor. I don't know if that's a Unity network quirk or a my project quirk, so I had to make do with the built-in box collider or the sphere collider, neither of which functioned like a 20-sided die, so I had to get a little creative. I could either Frankenstein a 20-sided shape out of multiple box colliders, or create the illusion that the sphere collider was in fact not a sphere but an icosahedron. I feel like the Franken shape would definitely be less reliable if it even worked, so I went with the latter. When you think about it, a D20 is just a low poly sphere, so my approach to this was taking the position of each face on the die. I can get the angle of it relative to the center point of the die, and using this I can basically check the die's current rotation angle and compare it with the other 20 angles to see which one is closest to it. That closest angle is from the most downwards pointing face side, so applying torque in the direction of that angle ensures the die flattens out on one of its 20 faces. There was a lot more fine-tuning that went into this over the course of 7 hours, adjusting torque weights depending on the velocity of the die and airtime, and I did have to make some compromises in the physics and realism department so that the die didn't just roll for an absurdly long time. In the end, this is what I got it looking like, and I added this effect because sometimes it looked super jank when rolling onto a number. Now I just hope it looks less jank and more like magic. There's more things I could do to this to make it move more realistic, but it's fine, and I've spent a day longer on this than I wanted to anyway. The special quality about the appropriately named Diamond D20 is that each roll has a 1 in 20 chance of rewarding you with a diamond. The die also has a face for losing 10 coins, so there's a slight bit of risk involved in rolling. With 18 faces left over, I thought of instead of tempting fate by making this fragile codebase even more convoluted, I'd just assign each of the usual 6 numbers onto the D20 3 times. Although I thought more recently maybe I should just increase the cap on the number on the D20, so maybe you roll double as big as the default dice. It's a weird situation because in the settings for the game, you can set the default dice to whatever you want in terms of how high it rolls, so that's why this system is like a little bit weird. It's not like a usual D20. The development of the D20 took more time than I hoped, as well as making the new menus in the game settings to adjust item and card pools, so I actually ran out of time for these last few items and didn't get to fully implement them, so I guess that's going to be in the next video. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more.